0400 hours, West Philippine Sea. The ocean is a void of black water meeting black sky. A heavy, suffocating humidity hangs over the deck of the lead U.S. destroyer. The ship cuts through the swells with a rhythmic, metallic shudder, leaving a trail of white foam that vanishes instantly into the dark. Inside the chilled air of the Combat Information Center, the only light comes from the glowing green and amber faces of radar consoles. Young sailors stare intently at the sweep lines. A Philippine Navy liaison officer stands near the tactical map, rubbing tired eyes. The low hum of cooling fans and the distant thrum of the engines provide a hypnotic, false sense of security. The world outside is silent. The electronic warfare officer freezes. He leans forward, pressing his headset tighter against his ears. A single red contact blips onto the long-range surface search radar. Then 2, then 50. The screen fills with a solid, terrifying wall of red pixels. The passive sensors spike violently, detecting hundreds of active targeting radars locking on simultaneously. The officer screams the warning. "Vampire! Vampire! Inbound massive!" The captain shouts the order to brace. The general quarters alarm klaxon tears through the ship, shattering the calm. The sound is deafening. Sailors bolt from their bunks, slamming into bulkheads as the destroyer initiates a hard emergency turn to starboard. The steel hull groans and shrieks under the sudden G-force. Coffee mugs smash against the deck. Books and charts fly across the bridge. On the horizon, the darkness rips open. A barrage of anti-ship cruise missiles ignites 5 miles out, turning the night into day. They skim the waves at supersonic speeds, looking like a swarm of burning hornets. The sound of their engines arrives a second later, a tearing, high-pitched scream that vibrates the sailors' teeth. The destroyer's defensive systems roar to life. The Phalanx close-in weapon system on the bow spins up with a mechanical whine. It erupts. A stream of tungsten rounds vomits into the sky, creating a wall of lead. The sound is like a giant canvas ripping apart. The first incoming missile walks into the stream of tracers and detonates. A massive fireball expands mid-air, showering the ocean with burning debris. But there are too many. A second missile weaves past the defensive fire. It ignores the U.S. destroyer and locks onto the smaller Philippine frigates sailing off the port beam. The warhead slams into the frigate's midsection just below the bridge. The impact is catastrophic. The steel plating buckles and liquefies instantly. A shockwave of orange fire blasts outward, hurling jagged pieces of the superstructure hundreds of feet into the air. The explosion lights up the faces of the crew on the U.S. destroyer's bridge. They watch in horror as the Allied ship breaks its keel. The bow rises violently out of the water. Sailors on the burning frigate are thrown like rag dolls across the tilting deck. Some leap into the oil-slicked water. Others are engulfed by the inferno raging from the ruptured fuel tanks. The tactical action officer on the U.S. destroyer slams his fist onto the fire control console. He authorizes full countermeasures. On the forward deck, the vertical launch hatches blow open. Compressed air hisses, followed by the roar of rocket motors. Interceptor missiles shoot vertically into the night, trailing white smoke, hunting the next wave of attackers. The captain grabs the encrypted radio handset. He yells into the mic, his voice cutting through the noise of the sirens and the roar of the guns. He declares a fleet-wide emergency. The burning wreck of the Allied frigate illuminates the water, casting long, dancing shadows across the bridge. The ocean is no longer silent. It is a killing field. 30 hours. Flight deck of USS Gerald R. Ford, east of Luzon. The sky is a bruised purple, bleeding into gray as dawn struggles to break. The massive aircraft carrier cuts through the Pacific swells, a floating city of steel and kerosene. On the flight deck, the air is thick with the smell of jet fuel and sea salt. Steam rises from the catapult tracks, drifting across the deck plates. Yellow-shirted flight directors wave glowing wands, their movements sharp and urgent. Green-shirted crews sprint under the wings of parked jets, checking hydraulic lines and arming pins. The engines of a dozen F-18 Super Hornets whine, a low pitch that builds to a deafening shriek. Suddenly, the ship's general announcement system barks 3 short, sharp tones. The launch the alert command echoes across the deck. The tempo explodes. Pilots scramble up the ladders of their jets. Canopies slam shut. Engines ignite with a roar that shakes the ship's frame. The first fighter taxis to the catapult shuttle. The nose gear locks in. The pilot salutes. The shooter on the deck drops to one knee and points forward. The catapult fires. In 2 seconds, the 30-ton jet accelerates from 0 to 160 miles per hour. It screams off the bow, dropping slightly toward the water before the afterburners kick in. Twin tongues of blue flame erupt from the exhaust. The jet tears upward, punching a hole through the low-hanging clouds. High above, the E-2 Hawkeye radar plane orbits the strike group. Inside, the radar operators stare at their screens. The digital map is a mess of hostile tracks. A massive formation of enemy bombers, escorted by heavy fighters, is closing in fast from the northwest. They are skimming the stratosphere, intent on unleashing a heavy payload on the carrier group. "Bandits, 12 o'clock high, range 80 miles, the controller yells over the net. The lead U.S. fighter pilot snaps his stick to the left. He pushes the throttle to the stops. The G-force pushes him back into his seat, squeezing the air from his lungs. His flight helmet presses down on his forehead. He arms his long-range air-to-air missiles. The tone in his headset changes from a search ping to a solid, high-pitched lock tone. The enemy formation appears as black specks against the rising sun. They grow larger instantly. The U.S. fighters release their missiles. Fox 3, white smoke trails streak across the sky. The missiles close the distance at Mach 4. The enemy lead fighters break formation, dumping flares to confuse the seekers. Bright magnesium stars burn in the air. One missile bites on a flare and veers off. The second finds its mark. It slams into the fuselage of an enemy heavy fighter. The explosion shreds the aircraft. The right wing shears off, spinning away into the clouds. The fuselage disintegrates in a ball of fire and metal shards. The cockpit canopy blows off as the enemy pilot ejects, tumbling into the freezing air. The remaining enemy bombers press on. They open their weapon bays. The U.S. pilot grits his teeth. He is out of long-range missiles. He switches to heat seekers and dives. He pulls the trigger. The fighter shudders as the Sidewinder missile leaps off the rail. It tracks the heat of a bomber's engine. The impact rips the engine nacelle clean off the bomber's wing. It loses lift. Smoke pours from the wound as it begins a slow, death spiral toward the ocean below. The U.S. pilot banks hard to avoid the debris field, scanning the sky for the next threat. The air war has begun. 800 hours defensive perimeter, 40 miles west of the task force. The morning sun beats down on the gray steel of the U.S. destroyer squadron. The ships steam in a line abreast formation, their bows cutting through the chop at 30 knots. Salt spray lashes the bridge windows. Inside, the air is freezing and still. The only sound is the hum of the tactical data links and the heavy breathing of the fire control team. On the main display, the enemy invasion fleet is a swarm of red icons. Between the fleets, hundreds of tiny yellow dots detach from the enemy ships and accelerate. They are not aircraft, they are missiles, a saturation wave. "All vampires inbound, time to impact 60 seconds, the tactical officer barks. The captain grips the railing. "Weapons free, clear the rails." The forward decks of the 4 destroyers erupt. 80 vertical launch cells blow their covers simultaneously. A wall of white smoke and fire consumes the horizon. Standard missiles scream out of their tubes, accelerating to Mach 3 in a heartbeat. They arc over the ships, trailing thick pillars of exhaust, turning the blue sky into a chaotic web of white streaks. Miles downrange, the interceptors meet the enemy wave. The sky fractures. Dozens of explosions blossom like black and orange flowers against the clouds. Shockwaves ripple across the water surface. The sound of the detonations rolls back to the ships like distant thunder. "Leakers! We have leakers!" the radar operator yells. 3 vampires through the net, bearing 270! The long-range defense has failed to stop them all. 3 enemy cruise missiles emerge from the smoke, skimming 10 feet above the waves. They weave erratically, dodging the falling debris. The 5-inch main gun on the lead destroyer swings around. It fires. Thump, thump, thump. The recoil shakes the entire vessel. The shell casings clang onto the steel deck. Flak bursts erupt in the path of the incoming missiles, throwing up walls of water and shrapnel. The first enemy missile clips a wave top, tumbles and disintegrates in a geyser of spray. The second flies straight into a 5-inch airburst. It detonates prematurely, showering the sea with harmless metal rain. The third missile survives. It ignores the flak. It ignores the decoys. It slams into the starboard hull of the adjacent destroyer. The impact is deafening. The warhead punches through 2 inches of reinforced steel before detonating inside the auxiliary machine room. The hull plate blows outward. A fireball vents into the atmosphere, carrying twisted piping and machinery with it. The 9,000-ton ship lurches violently to port. On the bridge of the lead ship, the captain watches his wingman burn. Black smoke pours from the gash in the flank, choking the air. "Damage report!" he shouts. The radio crackles with static and shouting. "Taking water! Fire in main engineering! We are listing!" "Maintain formation," the captain orders. "Cover them! Re-engage!" The surviving gunners on the burning ship ignore the flames. They traverse their weapons, locking onto the next wave emerging from the horizon. The wall must hold. 1,000 hours, deep underwater, west of Luzon. 300 feet below the surface, the ocean is a crushing weight of cold darkness. Inside the steel hull of the U.S. attack submarine, the silence is absolute. Crewmen move in socks on the linoleum decks to dampen sound. The air is recycled, smelling faintly of ozone and machinery. In the sonar room, the operator stares at a waterfall of green static. He does not blink. He adjusts a dial with trembling fingers. Above them, the surface churns. The noise of the enemy invasion fleet thunders through the water like a freight train passing overhead. The captain leans over the digital plot table. He signals with 2 fingers. The weapons officer nods and flips the red safety covers on the firing panel. A sudden rush of water floods tubes 1 and 2. The pressure equalizes. The target lock turns solid red. "Shoot," the captain whispers. Compressed air blasts the heavy torpedoes out of the bow. They clear the tubes and their motors ignite. The weapons accelerate to 50 knots, their twin propellers churning the water into a cavitating stream. They streak upward, guided by a thin copper wire, hunting the sound of the massive screws above. On the surface, the enemy landing ship plows through the waves. It is a floating fortress, its deck packed with battle tanks and hundreds of Marines. The first torpedo strikes the keel amidships. The explosion is tectonic. It lifts the 40,000-ton vessel bodily out of the water. The back of the ship snaps instantly. Steel screams as the structural beams tear apart. A massive geyser of water, oil, and debris shoots 300 feet into the air. The bow and stern fold upward like a closing book. The deck tilts violently. Heavy tanks slide sideways, crushing the guardrails and crashing into the sea. Marines scramble up the listing steel plates, sliding into the burning oil slick below. The second torpedo misses the broken ship and locks onto a supporting frigate. It slams into the stern. The propellers disintegrate. The rudder blows off. The frigate deadsticks in the water, drifting helplessly into the path of the sinking landing ship. An enemy destroyer spots the launch transient. It turns hard to starboard. "Torpedo in the water!" the enemy captain screams orders. The ship accelerates, its sonar pinging frantically. It drops depth charges off the stern. Cylinders of high explosives splash into the wake and sink fast. "Emergency deep," the U.S. captain orders. The plainsman pushes the yoke forward. The submarine dives steep, the deck angling down at 20 degrees. The hull groans under the increasing pressure. Boom, 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 the depth charges detonate above. The shockwave hammers the submarine. The vessel shakes violently. Light bulbs shatter in the passageways. Dust and cork insulation rain down from the overhead pipes. Men are thrown against their consoles. The hull rings like a struck bell, the sound reverberating through the steel bones of the ship. The captain grips the periscope stand to steady himself. He looks at the depth gauge. They are passing 800 feet. The shaking stops. Above, the broken landing ship slips beneath the waves. A massive vortex of bubbles and wreckage marks its grave. The invasion force formation scatters, their orderly lines broken by the invisible killer below. 1,300 hours, coastal tree line, northern Luzon. The tropical sun hammers down on the white sand beach. Heat waves shimmer off the empty shoreline. Inside the dense jungle foliage, U.S. Marines and Philippine Army regulars lie motionless in dugouts. Sweat drips from their chins, soaking into the dirt. Camouflage netting covers the heavy machine gun nests. The only sound is the buzzing of insects and the rhythmic lap of the tide. The air is heavy, smelling of salt and wet vegetation. The horizon disappears behind a wall of white chemical smoke. Through the haze, the invasion force emerges. Hundreds of armored amphibious vehicles churn the water into froth. Their engines roar like a chainsaw cutting through the sky. They hit the shallows. The tracks bite into the sand. A whistle screams overhead. Naval artillery shells slam into the beach. Crump, crump, crump. Massive geysers of wet sand and coral blast into the air. Palm trees along the perimeter snap like matchsticks. Smoke chokes the tree line. The bombardment lifts. The first wave of vehicles grinds onto the dry sand. The heavy steel ramps drop with a metallic crash. "Fire!" the company commander bellows. The jungle edge explodes. A solid line of muzzle flashes lights up the shadows. Thousands of rounds from heavy machine guns tear into the open ramps. The enemy infantry charging out into the sunlight run into a wall of lead. Bodies jerk violently and crumple into the surf. The water around the landing craft turns instant bright red. A U.S. Marine rises from his spider hole. He shoulders a Javelin anti-tank missile. The seeker tone locks. He fires. The missile shoots upward, climbs and dives. It strikes the top armor of a lead amphibious transport. The vehicle detonates. The explosion rips the hull apart from the inside out. A massive fireball engulfs the squad of soldiers still inside. Burning fuel sprays across the sand. A turret flies spinning through the air and crashes into the dunes. The surviving enemy vehicles return fire. Autocannons chew up the vegetation. Tracers zip through the leaves, shredding ferns and branches. Dirt and wood splinters spray into the faces of the defenders. An enemy tank rolls off a landing craft, crushing the bodies of its own fallen infantry. Its main gun traverses toward the bunker line. Boom! A high explosive shell strikes a Philippine Army fighting position. Sandbags disintegrate. The earth heaves upward. 2 soldiers are hurled backward, landing in a heap of tangled gear. A medic sprints from cover, dragging a wounded gunner by his vest, diving as another shell screams overhead. The beach is no longer sand and water, it is fire and blood. 1600 hours, Port of Vigan, northwest Luzon. The coastal city is a ghost town. Shutters bang against concrete walls in the hot wind. Smoke from the distant beachhead battles drifts through the empty streets, stinging the eyes. Abandoned cars clog the intersections. In the industrial district, shipping containers sit stacked in colorful rows, forming a steel maze. Inside a warehouse overlooking the docks, U.S. Army Rangers crouch in the shadows. They check their magazines one last time. The silence is heavy, broken only by the distant thud of artillery. A low vibration rattles the warehouse windows. It grows louder, deepening into a roar. Eyes up, the squad leader hisses. A squadron of heavy enemy transport aircraft screams over the city, flying dangerously low. Their bay doors yawn open. Hundreds of white chutes bloom instantly against the gray sky. The enemy airborne regiment descends on the port, their boots dangling just above the rooftops. The first paratrooper hits the asphalt of the container yard. He rolls, cuts his chute, and raises his rifle. Light them up! The warehouse roof erupts. Muzzle flashes sparkle along the parapet. A storm of automatic fire sweeps across the open ground. The enemy soldier on the asphalt jerks violently as 3 rounds strike his chest plate. He falls backward, his weapon clattering across the ground. Other paratroopers, still dangling in their harnesses, are hit mid-air. They go limp, drifting into power lines and cranes like broken puppets. The surviving enemy troops hit the ground and sprint for cover behind the shipping containers. They return fire instantly. Green tracers zip through the air, smashing into the warehouse brickwork. Concrete chips fly into the Rangers' faces. A rocket-propelled grenade screams across the gap and slams into the office window. Boom! The glass blasts outward. The explosion throws 2 Rangers across the room. One slams into a filing cabinet, sliding down in a daze. The other does not move. Dust chokes the air. Suppressive fire! Move! Move! The Rangers leap down the stairwell, exiting onto the street level. They stack up on the warehouse door. The squad leader kicks it open. They flood into the alleyway. An enemy squad rounds the corner. Both sides freeze for a split second. Then, point-blank chaos. Rifles bark on full auto. The sound is deafening in the narrow space. Empty brass casings rain onto the pavement. An enemy soldier takes a round to the neck. Blood sprays across the white wall. He gurgles and collapses. A Ranger takes a hit to the shoulder, spinning around, but keeps firing with one hand. Grenade! A Ranger pulls the pin and hurls the explosive over a sedan. It lands at the feet of the enemy machine gun team. Bang! The blast lifts the car off its suspension. Shrapnel shreds the tires. The enemy gunners are silenced. The fight devolves into a brutal room-to-room hunt. Soldiers smash through apartment doors. Shotguns blast locks off hinges. In a narrow hallway, a Ranger tackles an enemy paratrooper. They crash through a drywall partition, tumbling into a living room. Knives flash. The struggle is desperate, primal. The Ranger drives his blade down. The enemy stops thrashing. Outside, the second wave of transports roars overhead, dropping vehicles and heavy equipment. The city is burning. The port is a kill box. 1900 hours. Stratosphere. Philippine Sea. The sun dips below the curvature of the Earth, casting a blood-red glow across the upper atmosphere. The air is thin and freezing at 50,000 feet. A formation of U.S. strategic bombers glides through the twilight, their black delta wings blending into the darkening sky. They leave no contrails. Inside the pressurized cockpits, pilots breathe rhythmically through oxygen masks. The only sound is the low, steady hum of the avionics cooling systems. Miles below, the ocean is a featureless black sheet. The enemy logistics fleet is unaware. The weapons systems officer taps a glass screen. A digital grid locks onto the coordinates. Doors coming open, he states flatly. The bellies of the massive bombers yawn open. Hydraulic actuators whine. The internal rotary launchers spin. Heavy guided munitions drop from the bays, tumbling for a split second before their fins snap open. They catch the airstream. The bombs nose down, accelerating through the clouds, hunting the heat signatures below. On the surface, the captain of an enemy supertanker stands on the bridge wing. He scans the horizon for submarines. The sea is calm, then the sky whistles. The first bomb strikes the tanker amidships, punching through the main deck and into the No. 3 oil reservoir. A microsecond later, the fuse triggers. The explosion is apocalyptic. The 300,000-ton vessel does not just break, it disintegrates. A massive sphere of orange plasma erupts from the hull, expanding outward at supersonic speed. The steel plating vaporizes. The bridge tower is torn from its foundation and hurled into the sea. A shockwave of heat and pressure flattens the waves for a mile in every direction. A nearby munitions ship is next. A bomb slams into its forward cargo hold. The secondary explosion dwarfs the first. Thousands of artillery shells and rockets detonate simultaneously. The ship vanishes in a blinding white flash that lights up the horizon like a second sun. A mushroom cloud of black smoke and debris punches through the cloud layer, rising 20,000 feet into the air. The remaining support ships panic. They break formation, turning hard to avoid the burning oil slicks spreading across the water. It is too late. More bombs rain down. A repair vessel takes a direct hit to the engine block. The stern lifts out of the water, the propeller still spinning, before the ship snaps in half and plunges into the depths. Burning fuel covers the surface of the ocean. Sailors who survive the initial blast surface into a sea of fire. They scream as the flames consume the oxygen. The water glows an angry, hellish red. High above, the bomb bay doors cycle shut. The U.S. bombers bank slowly to the east, their mission complete. Below them, the enemy's supply line is no longer a fleet. It is a burning graveyard. 2,200 hours, outer defense ring, Philippine Sea. A heavy tropical rain squall smothers the task force. Visibility drops to near zero. The ocean is rough, whitecaps breaking against the gray hulls of the picket ships. On the fantail of a U.S. frigate, lookouts scan the darkness with thermal scopes. Rain hammers against the steel plating, drowning out the steady thrum of the engines. The radar screens are a mess of green clutter from the storm. It is a blind man's fight. Suddenly, the static on the screen organizes. A dozen small, fast contacts break out of the squall line only 2 miles out. They are not drifting, they are charging. "Surface contact! Danger close! Brace!" the tactical officer screams. Floodlights snap on, cutting cones of blinding white light through the driving rain. They reveal the enemy, a swarm of low-profile, fast attack craft bouncing violently over the waves. They are moving at 60 knots. They are inside the minimum range for heavy missiles. They are coming to ram. The frigate's 25mm chain guns spin up. Thud, 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 thud. Tracers slash through the rain, stitching the water with red light. The lead enemy boat takes a full burst to the cockpit. The fiberglass hull shatters like glass. The fuel tank ignites. The boat turns into a skipping fireball, flipping end over end before smashing into the trough of a wave. The other boats weave through the fire. A gunner's mate on the U.S. ship racks the bolt of his .50 caliber machine gun. He opens fire. Brass casings pour onto the wet deck. He walks the rounds into the engine block of the second attacker. The boat explodes. Debris rains down on the frigate's deck, burning plastic, twisted metal, and body parts. "Inbound, port side!" An enemy boat slips through the gunfire. It fires a rocket-propelled grenade. The warhead streaks across the water and slams into the frigate's superstructure. Bang! Sparks shower the bridge windows. Shrapnel shreds the radar array. The U.S. ship lurches. Overhead, the roar of rotors cuts through the storm. A U.S. Navy helicopter banks hard, the door gunner leaning out against his harness. The minigun roars, a solid stream of fire that sounds like tearing canvas. The stream saws the attacking boat in half. The enemy vessel cartwheels, flinging its crew into the black water. The last enemy boat ignores the frigate. It aims for the massive shadow of the aircraft carrier in the distance. A U.S. destroyer accelerates to intercept. It turns its bow directly into the path of the suicide craft. The collision is sickening. The steel prow of the destroyer smashes into the small boat at 30 knots. The fiberglass boat disintegrates instantly. The impact shakes the 9,000-ton warship. The enemy boat is crushed under the hull, grinding along the keel until it vanishes in the turbulent wake. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" The captain scans the water. The squall passes as quickly as it arrived. The sea is lit by the flickering fires of burning fuel and wreckage. The attack is broken. The carrier sails on into the night, untouched. 0200 hours, day 2, center of the battle group. The ocean is a graveyard of burning steel. Thick, oily smoke clings to the water, obscuring the stars. The battle has devolved into a chaotic, close-range brawl. U.S. and enemy ships drift within visual range of each other, their hulls scarred and blackened. Guns flash in the darkness, illuminating the devastation in strobe light bursts. The sea churns with the wake of maneuvering vessels. In the center of the enemy formation, the massive battle cruiser, the invasion force flagship, looms like a mountain. Its radar arrays spin frantically. Its main guns thunder, sending shells screaming toward the Allied line. On the bridge of the lead U.S. destroyer, the captain wipes soot from his face. He points to the giant shadow on the horizon. All batteries concentrate fire on the flagship. Empty the magazines. The order goes out. 3 U.S. destroyers turn in unison. They ignore the smaller enemy frigates firing at them. They lock every remaining weapon onto the battle cruiser. The night rips open. Dozens of missiles streak from the U.S. ships. They fly low, skimming the wave tops. At the same time, the 5-inch deck guns fire in rapid succession. Boom, boom, boom! The shells arc through the smoke. The enemy flagship fights back. Its defensive cannons roar, creating a wall of tracers. The first few missiles explode in midair, showering the water with shrapnel. But the volume of fire is too high. One heavy anti-ship missile punches through the defensive screen. It strikes the enemy flagship at the waterline. The explosion is felt before it is heard. The massive hull creates a shockwave that flattens the sea. The armor belt shatters. Tons of seawater rush into the breach. The ship shudders violently, throwing its crew across the deck. A second missile hits the bridge tower. The command center vaporizes in a ball of orange fire. The communications mast topples over, crashing onto the deck below and crushing a missile launcher. Suddenly, a catastrophic secondary explosion tears the ship apart. The fires reach the forward magazine. A pillar of white flame shoots 2,000 feet into the night sky. The bow of the 20,000-ton behemoth lifts physically out of the water. Steel plates the size of cars rain down for miles. The shockwave blows out the windows of every ship within 3 miles. The enemy fleet freezes. Their command structure is gone. Their flagship is a burning wreck, listing 40 degrees to port and sinking fast. Confusion spreads instantly. Enemy ships stop firing. They break formation. One destroyer turns hard to the west, fleeing the kill zone. Then another. The disciplined invasion force fractures into a panicked mob. Press the attack, the U.S. Admiral orders over the fleet net. Do not let them regroup. Allied ships surge forward, their engines roaring. They fire into the retreating sterns of the enemy vessels. Shells slam into rudders and propellers. The retreat becomes a rout. The ocean is lit by the burning pyres of the defeated fleet, marking the path of their escape. 600 hours, Day 2, West Philippine Sea. The sun breaks the horizon, casting a harsh, golden light over the water. The roaring cacophony of battle is gone. In its place, a heavy, suffocating silence hangs over the ocean. The sea is no longer blue. It is stained black with crude oil and aviation fuel. The air smells of wet ash and burnt plastic. Thick columns of black smoke rise from the horizon like dark monoliths, marking the graves of the invasion fleet. A U.S. destroyer steams slowly through the debris field. Its gray hull is scorched black. Pockmarks from shrapnel riddle the superstructure. A jagged hole gapes in the radar tower. On the deck, sailors move slowly, their uniforms stained with soot and grease. They do not cheer. They lean against the railings, staring out at the devastation. The water is a graveyard. Twisted metal, shattered shipping crates, and torn life vests bob in the oily swells. The bow of a sunken enemy frigate sticks vertically out of the water, groaning as the air escapes its compartments. It sinks lower with every wave. "Man overboard! Port side!" A lookout calls out, his voice cracking. A rigid hull. Inflatable boat cuts through the sludge. The engine whines as the coxswain maneuvers around a floating piece of aircraft wing. A U.S. Navy rescue swimmer sits on the gunwale, flippers dangling. He spots an arm waving weakly from a patch of burning oil. He dives. The swimmer fights through the slick. He grabs the survivor, an enemy sailor, burned and barely conscious. He drags the man back to the boat. Strong hands reach down and haul them both over the rubber siding. The survivor coughs up black water and collapses onto the floorboards. On the flight deck of the aircraft carrier, the scene is controlled chaos. Medics run with stretchers. Helicopters land in rapid succession, offloading wounded from the escort ships. The rotors whip the bloody bandages of the men lying on the asphalt. A surgeon kneels beside a Marine, applying a tourniquet to a shattered leg. The Marine grits his teeth, his knuckles white as he grips the deck grating. The Admiral walks onto the bridge wing. He lifts his binoculars. He scans the miles of wreckage stretching to the west. The invasion force is shattered. The threat is neutralized. But the cost is laid out before him in burning steel and floating bodies. He lowers the glasses. He picks up the internal comms handset. "All stations," he says, his voice flat. "Stand down. Set condition for search and rescue. Bring them home." The destroyer blows its whistle, a long, mournful blast that echoes across the empty ocean. The war is over. The cleanup begins.